This is Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review with your college football Week 9 betting preview as we run down a bunch of the key games on the college football slate for this weekend, for this Saturday. Let's begin with Maryland at Indiana. It's a Big Ten matchup here, and we have the Maryland Terrapins, really, in my opinion, catching too many points in this game as an underdog. When you look at what Indiana has done in recent games, it hasn't been exactly pretty for them by any stretch of the imagination. It's been very, very hit or miss for their new starting quarterback this year, Richard Lago. He has been, good at times, not so good at other times. And Maryland, on the other hand, I'll tell you what, Perry Hills makes a big difference for this team. We saw them struggle, obviously, in a loss to Minnesota. We saw them struggle to move the football against Penn State once Perry Hills went down in that game, and of course he didn't play in the Minnesota game. They missed him. This offense took a nosedive at that point, but we saw Perry Hills return for this Maryland offense last week in the win against Michigan State, 28-17. Much better performance from him. 2 touchdowns, 21 of 27, 200 yards, throwing the football. Very good stuff from Maryland. And a nice win against Michigan State to maybe give them some confidence. Their second, Big Ten conference win. They had one against Purdue earlier this season. Now they go on the road, face a struggling Indiana team, which has lost 3 straight games against Ohio State, Nebraska, and Northwestern. All of them losses, 1 and 2 against the spread as well during that time. And Maryland lost 47-28 at home against Indiana last year. They put up yards. The game should have been closer than that final score, but turnovers were a big issue. I think Maryland's live here, and at anything higher than +3, I think Maryland probably worth a bet in that game. Clemson at Florida State. This was expected to be the big-time showdown before the season started here in the ACC. 2 teams expected to be in the mix for the ACC, if not the national championship. That's the case for Clemson, certainly. But for Florida State, they're pretty much relegated to the spoiler role. And I'll tell you what, I would be a little bit concerned about laying 4.5 and 5 with Clemson in this matchup. Clemson has been erratic on offense at times, which is inexplicable. They brought everyone back, their offensive line, Deshaun Watson at quarterback, Wayne Gallman at running back, a bunch of their top receivers, yet their offense has been a little bit spotty at times, some mistakes, and their defense even has been, teams have been able to move the football. And let's not forget, fortunate to beat Louisville, fortunate to beat NC State. If NC State doesn't miss a bunch of field goals in that game, we may not be talking about an undefeated Clemson team heading into this game. So there's some question marks still with the Tigers coming into this one. And Florida State, I know it's had some disappointing losses on their resume. North Carolina lost, the Louisville loss where they got blown out, but a bye week now for Jimbo Fisher to rally the troops, get them focused. This is going to be as close to a national championship game as Florida State has left on their schedule, and maybe a chance to put some new plays into the offensive playbook for DeAndre Francois, and maybe a chance for him to, with that extra practice time, to really come out and give Florida State one of his best performances at the quarterback position so far this season. So I just don't trust Clemson. They haven't executed crisply or sharply enough so far to endorse them in such a big game like this, especially with Florida State at home off a bye, likely to bring a home run effort. If I had to bet that one, I'd look to Florida State plus the 4.5. Next game up, we've got West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and I'll be honest, West Virginia, I don't want to say they've made a full-on believer out of me after last week's win against TCU, but it went a long way forward to making me finally get impressed with this West Virginia team. They just dismantled it, took apart a TCU team off their bye week last week, a team that TCU and Gary Patterson have been phenomenal off a bye week, not last week. West Virginia dominating them in that football game. Now they go on the road, face Oklahoma State. I actually bet West Virginia at the opener in this game when they were below a field goal. Now that it's up to 3.5, I'd be a little bit worried that you've lost too much line value, but still, I would lean West Virginia. Oklahoma State's had issues. They've been a very suspect defense. West Virginia, the far better defensive team. This is the best West Virginia defense, I think, since Dana Holgerson's been there. Oklahoma State's defense has been spotty. Mason Rudolph, the quarterback's been under duress. The offensive line really hasn't played up to its level that you're used to seeing from a Mike Gundy coached Oklahoma State team. That's a concern against a West Virginia defense that's been good. And on the flip side, West Virginia's offense has moved the football very well. Skylar Howard, the quarterback's done a great job. He continues to progress at the quarterback spot for the Mountaineers. I can totally understand why West Virginia's taken money, and I agree with that move. Just a question of value and whether you want to get involved now that you're getting a little bit of a worse number now at 3.5. Next game up, Baylor, Texas. I'll tell you what, the total's gone up, and I agree with that, 70-72. I know Baylor's had some offensive troubles early in the season, got off to slow starts, but I think they crank it up here against Texas defense, and Texas really benefiting the last couple weeks playing Kansas State and Iowa State. Now that they're playing a real offense again, I think Oklahoma did huge damage against Texas, and I think Baylor capable of doing that here in this game. But at the same time, how good is Baylor's defense? They haven't exactly been tested by a litany of quality offenses, and Texas has certainly been able to move the football at most of the season. Shane Buechele, freshman quarterback, has done a good job. Tyrone Swoops comes in as the change-up quarterback, I guess you could say, the dual threat. When they need a running play, they'll go to him. So it's a tough offense, I think, for Baylor to prepare for. The total's been bumped up a little bit in this game. Certainly would agree with that. So lean over the total between Baylor and Texas. Nebraska, Wisconsin. This is a big game. Nebraska undefeated. Wisconsin 2 losses yet. 2 losses that you can't hang your head over, that's for sure. Michigan, no shame in losing that one specifically. But here they are, 9.5 point favorite at home against an undefeated Nebraska team. I'm not sold on Nebraska yet. They got to prove that they can hang with Wisconsin here before I believe in them. They've had a very, very light schedule to this point in the season. Not a game I'm going to get involved with, but it's a great game to use moving forward. If Nebraska comes out and lays an egg and looks really bad in this game, it could tell you that their undefeated start was nothing but schedule related, and maybe a good bet against team if they're not able to hang with Wisconsin here in this football game. Next up on the slate, we've got Duke and Georgia Tech. Very interesting matchup here. Duke coming in off a bye. Georgia Tech is as well, actually, but I'll tell you what, David Cutcliffe off a bye week here at Duke, he's been pretty damn good. Duke facing a triple option offense. They've been pretty damn good against those type of teams. Shut down Army when they faced them earlier this season. They should know what's coming from this Georgia Tech team, having faced Army, another triple option team earlier this year. And it's worth noting, Duke off the bye last year faced Virginia Tech, won that game outright as an underdog. Duke off the bye 2 years ago against this same Georgia Tech team, also won that game outright as an underdog. And I don't like this Georgia Tech team. I don't know what it is about them, but there's just something about them that hasn't really impressed me so far this season. They've been very, very erratic at times. You look at the loss they suffered to Miami, which doesn't look as good, which looks even worse actually after the way Miami has stumbled in the last few weeks. So there's some issues that I have with Georgia Tech, and Duke has matched up well with Georgia Tech. There's absolutely no denying that. Duke beat them 31-25 2 years ago as a dog. Duke beat them 34-20 last year as a dog. Plus 6.5. I definitely would look to Duke. In fact, I've bet Duke here. Plus 6.5. Think that's worth a look on Saturday. Next game up, we've got Auburn, Ole Miss. A big-time SEC battle here. We've got one team going up, one team going down. Auburn's the one going up. I mean, Auburn has been resurgent since Rhett Lashley took over the offensive play calling duties. This offense has come to life. They're running the football with great success. And Ole Miss defense has not been very good in recent games. That's definitely a concern for them moving forward. Chad Kelly, though, the quarterback, certainly a guy that continues to produce offensively for this team. But, I mean, LSU ran them over last week in terms of running the football. And if you watched Auburn in their 59-3 dismantling of Arkansas last week, they did the same thing to Arkansas that LSU did to Ole Miss. I mean, they pounded the football right down their throat. I think that Auburn ground attack, which has really gotten going in the last couple games since the play calling duties shifted to Rhett Lashley, I think they can have similar success with this up-tempo, run-based spread offense against Ole Miss, which has been bullied in the trenches the last couple games. I think Auburn puts up a ton of points, and I do think Ole Miss is capable of putting up some points in this game. So I do agree with Auburn taking early money. I think it's a little tricky now to lay more than a field goal, but would still lean Auburn. I think the better bet might be over. Should see some points. It is worth noting that since those play-calling changes were made, you look at the points that Auburn's put up, 58, 38, and 56 their last 3 games. Ole Miss Miss has given up 38, 34 in their last two SEC games against LSU and Arkansas. So I think they're going to be in for more struggles trying to stop this resurgent Auburn offense here on Saturday. We've got Michigan State. I'll keep this short and sweet. There's no point spread. There's no amount of points as an underdog that would get me on Michigan State. None. Zero. It's Michigan or pass for me. It's just a question of do you want to lay 24.5 now when this line opened at 20 with Michigan. But Michigan is going to have no problems running up the score. They're not going to think twice about punching in a late touchdown if they want to. They have an axe to grind. They have some demons to basically get rid of here, facing this Michigan State team for that payback for that just horrendous, brutal loss last year on the botched punt at the end of the game that got blocked and returned for a touchdown on the last play of the game. Michigan State stealing a victory. There's no number of points that would attract me enough to back Sparty in this game. Next game, we've got Washington and Utah. This is a very interesting game because Washington, 10.5 point road favorite, and they have looked phenomenal. There is no denying that. However, I would caution people about Washington. They faced a bunch of weak foes early in the season, this Huskies team. Their two signature wins, the two wins that their power rating has skyrocketed off of, Stanford. We're finding out Stanford's not really good this year, or at least not as good as they've been in the past. They couldn't score a touchdown at home against Colorado last week, Stanford. Struggled to beat Notre Dame on the road. Got annihilated by both Washington and Washington State in back-to-back weeks. Stanford's not as good this year. And then their other big marquee win, Washington, was against Oregon. Well, Oregon stinks, okay? Oregon's got no defense. They got a lame duck head coach. Mark Helfrich ain't coming back. He's gone at the end of the year. I mean, it's a program in decline with this Oregon team. So those are their two marquee wins, which maybe looked good 3-4 weeks ago for Washington. They don't look as good now, with Stanford not looking as good, with Oregon shit in the bed, not playing good football at all, especially on defense. So I just don't know if there's value right now with Washington. And let's not sell Utah short. We're talking about a 10.5 point underdog here at home with a Utah team that is very well coached under Kyle Whittingham, that is gritty, that will grind the game for the full 60 minutes, that will battle their asses off like a Utah team usually does. And a Utah team that was pretty impressive last week in a win against UCLA. In Los Angeles last week, a pretty good performance from this team. They're starting to get their offense is starting to get better. Their defense obviously a concern when you give up 45 points, but starting to get some playmakers on offense, which is a good sign for this Utah team. Great running performance last week by Joe Williams. He was phenomenal. 332 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns last week, carried this Utah offense. I'm not saying I'm betting against Washington here, and I'm not actually, but I just don't see the value laying 10.5 because all those great wins for Washington early in the season, they don't look so good right now. So I think there's value actually on the Utah side, but I do respect Washington. I do respect Chris Peterson. This is a team on a mission looking to make the playoffs. So it's a game that even though I think Utah's got the point spread value at the current number, I'm not going to go against them. I'll go against Washington here in this game. All right, let's wrap it up. It's play of the week time for Week 9 in college football. 5-3, 63% so far. Let's be honest, we had TCU as a play of the week last week. Completely wrong side, dead wrong side loser there with that one. That's my bad. Shit the bed on that one. Let's see if we can get it back this week. We're going to go to a small Conference USA game, North Texas and Texas San Antonio, and a real good concept to tell people about here about college football as we get into November. When we get into November college football and you're making your betting decisions based on full season stats, full season records, you're not going to be very successful, at least in my opinion, betting November college football. You're going to have morphing teams that maybe looked awful in September, but all of a sudden, here late in October and getting into November, we're starting to see signs of life from certain teams that looked so bad in September. And now you're going to have residual betting value to support those teams that are morphing into improved teams. Similarly, if there's a team that got off to a red-hot start in September, they're starting to struggle now, you've got some value to go against them as we move into November. Don't take the full season records as gospel. You want to see current form, morphing teams that sucked in September but are getting better and showing progress here in October into November, or teams that were great in September that are starting to really play poorly here in late October and into November. We got a situation here with North Texas against Texas San Antonio. Look at North Texas. Started the season awful. 34-21 loss to SMU. 41-20 win against Cookman. 32-0 loss to Florida. Since then, they beat Rice outright as an underdog. They lose by 17 against Middle Tennessee State, but get a push in that game. They win outright against Marshall as an underdog, double digits, and then they win outright off their bye week as 17.5-point underdogs at Army last week, 35-18. This is a morphing team. This is a team that is showing progress right now. There is no denying that. They're starting to get better. The offense starting to move the ball, and even the defense is playing better recently. They've given up 39 points in the last 2 games combined. This is a North Texas team on the rise and covering numbers and staying way below any interest from the betting markets. I mean, we're talking about a 5-1-1 against the spread team now this season. And on the flip side, you've got Texas San Antonio coming off a demoralizing home loss to UTEP 52-49 last week. They lose outright in overtime as 10.5-point favorites. In fact, you look at this UTSA team when they've been laying points this year, not good. They don't sniff a point spread cover in their first game of the season as favorites, laying 24 against Alabama State. They only win that game 26-13. In their other 2 games as favorites, they win by 1 at Rice as 2.5-point favorites, don't cover there. And of course, the outright loss as double-digit favorites at home against UTEP, a bad UTEP team, in overtime last week. It was a draining game. The defense was out on the field for a lot of plays. It went to overtime. I don't think that's an easy game for a mediocre Texas San Antonio team to bounce back from. And North Texas, the last 2 years they've played UTSA, they only lost by 7 2 years ago, and they beat them 30-23 last year. And when you compare these 2 teams last year to this year, I see North Texas starting to improve. I think I'm starting to see UTSA regress, and I think that's something we can take advantage of here. North Texas is making progress, and the betting markets aren't catching on to it. Let's make it official and take North Texas, the Mean Green, plus 3.5. That's rotation number 189. North Texas, plus 3.5. I like them to win this game outright, but even if they lose by a field goal, that's good enough. But the value here is North Texas, plus 3.5 to take down their in-state brethren, UTSA. North Texas, plus 3.5, your college football Week 9 play of the week. All right, that will wrap it up. My look at college football Week 9 from a betting perspective.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SPR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.